This is Maureen Kafkas, the Brain BS coach, here to tell you about the episode today. So, this week we're going to start a new series. I call them series, but really it's just the same topic for as long as I feel like I need to keep sharing it, and then I move on to something else. So, we're talking about relationships now. This is super important because the reason why we are here in human form is to connect with other humans. This is why we're here for all the lessons. So all those people who are bugging the crap out of you, who are so hard to get along with, whether it's a coworker or it's someone you're married to, there's a lesson there in it for you. It's an invitation to go inward. And I'm going to show you how to go inward and some of the things that you can do to improve your relationship without your partner even knowing you're doing it, if that's the only way to do it. So I've invited Susan Page, author of Why Talking Is Not Enough. She wrote a book all about the spiritual approach to relationships and the power of one. So sit back and settle in. Episode number 162 of the Brain BS podcast, Why Talking Is Not Enough with Susan Page. Do you want more out of your life but not exactly sure what that might be? Are you longing for something but can't quite put your finger on what it is? That is the universe speaking to you, and it is time to listen up. I'm your host, Maureen Kafkas, the Brain BS coach. I created the Brain BS podcast to help people define what success means to them and show them how to get it. I help you to let go of fear and doubt and prepare your nervous system for success. I show you how to understand your own energy and to trust yourself to make all the decisions. If you are ready to go inward and stop looking outside yourself for all the answers, this is the podcast for you. Now let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Brain BS podcast. I have the author of one of my favorite books here today called Why Talking Is Not Enough, The 8 Loving Actions, and her name's Susan Page. And I'm just going to let her say hello and let her share anything that she might want you to know about her.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me to do this interview. I appreciate it. I conducted these groups for couples for 22 years before I retired. And my couples groups are very unusual because I invite only one member of the couple to come to the group. So it's skills that you can learn that make an enormous impact on your relationship, but you don't have to engage your partner and say, we need to talk. You don't have to do that. It's all things you can do by yourself to impact your relationship.
And I love that so much because at the Brain BS podcast, we're all about living consciously in this spiritual path in life. And many of us are married to somebody who's not interested in going that route. And everyone thinks that, if they continue on this path, that they're going to have to leave their partner, or they're not going to be able to stay in their marriage. But the truth is, this book is all about the power of one, and that you actually can, and not just like stay there and make it work, like you can actually make it thrive.
Absolutely true. And you, this method, these little skills that I teach are easy to learn, and they can make a tremendous impact on the relationship. They can really make a difference. It could be a problem or an issue that you've been struggling with for 10 years or 20 years or something, but this will be a new approach to trying to work out that problem.
Yeah, well, it'll be fun to talk about the 8 loving actions because they're easy to learn, but not always super easy to practice, depending on the moment. So we're going to go through the 8 loving actions, and we'll just talk about them one at a time, and I'll let you give background on it and why you picked that action. And then I'll give you a little bit of feedback on how it worked for me.
Oh, good. That's
okay.
That you've been trying these actions. That'll be very interesting. I call this general method spiritual partnership. And what I mean by that is many people will say, well, I'm a spiritual person, I follow a spiritual path, but how do you bring that spirituality into your relationship? Nobody talks about that. It doesn't mean you just meditate together. It means that you bring the principles of living a spiritual life into your relationship. But again, so this book gives you ideas exactly how to do that, how to bring your spiritual values into your relationship, so that you always are asking, if I we're going to respond to this situation in the most spiritual way possible, what would I do? Or you can ask yourself now, is what I just did moving me in the direction of being a more spiritual person or a less spiritual person? And I go into some detail about that, what those values are in the book, but that's the overall principle that covers all of these actions.
Yeah, and I love that concept because I made up my own term for it, spiri-practical. So it's about like practically, how do you practically bring in this stuff in a day-to-day life and actually implement what you're learning and not just reading about books and learning all these theories and these esoteric descriptions of them, but actually applying them to your life. So let's get started. Let's go to the first loving action of adoptive spirit of goodwill.
Well, what's missing in many relationships is a background of a spirit of goodwill. So you have to assess, do I have a spirit of goodwill toward my partner? Am I accepting of my partner? Am I compassionate toward my partner for the things that maybe I wish were a little different? Am I committed to this relationship? Because if that spirit of goodwill toward your partner is missing, none of the rest of this will work. It's a fundamental background you have to have, and so it's important to assess that in your own relation, in yourself. Do I truly love my partner and have compassion and goodwill toward him or her? And so that's kind of the groundwork, and that's the first.
Yeah. So, and what I found when I started to do this, before I learned how to set boundaries and make my needs a priority, I did not have a spirit of goodwill because I was full of resentment. So I had to work through that resentment. I actually had to tap into anger to work through this resentment and start speaking up. But once I was able to do that and feel like I was on a more even ground with him, I realized that I was spending way more time without a spirit. I still loved him, but my spirit of goodwill was I had my fighting gloves on, to try to get what I want and being mad at him because I didn't know how to speak up. And I was taking things out on him that wasn't his fault. And when I realized that, it was a lot easier to adopt a spirit of goodwill about him.
Oh, that's very interesting. And that is a good illustration of how important this is. If you feel, as you said, like you look at it and you feel like I don't have a spirit of goodwill, you need to begin to cultivate it. And some of these other actions will help you develop it too. So you don't have to finish that one before you move on to the other ones, but you always need to keep it in mind. Do I really care about my partner and want my partner to flourish or am I carrying anger or resentment?
Yeah. So okay, so the next one, I love this one because this changed a lot very quickly. So the number 2 action is give up problem solving.
Right. Because if you define something as a problem, the implication is that it has a solution. If you just work long enough and hard enough, you'll find a solution. And many problems are not problems, they're a fact of life. They're not something that necessarily has a tidy little solution. What you work for instead is to develop a new consciousness about whatever that issue is so that it can resolve itself or transform itself in the future as you develop a new attitude about it. Instead of trying to sit down and solve the problem, which usually involves communication, this is an alternative to communication. I think it's wonderful if couples have good communication. If you've been to some of these workshops and you practice the communication and you feel like you are in good touch with each other. But many, many couples try to use communication to solve their problems, and it doesn't work because they're not very good at it. One partner is better at communicating than the other. And so you're using a skill that starts you out on an unequal playing field. And also usually the point of communication is if you would change, we wouldn't have a problem. If you wouldn't be so messy, if you wouldn't play with the kids more, if you would, et cetera, you change. And that's solving a problem by getting your partner to change, which will never be successful.
Oh
So
my gosh.
the idea of problem solving and move on to some of these other strategies, and don't view a situation as a problem, but rather as a fact of life. And so how do we manage it? And how do we develop a new consciousness about it?
Yeah. So this one was really good for me because I love that line. As soon as I saw, like I see it all the time too with friends and stuff in marriages. They've been fighting with their partner about something for like 20 years. The same with me and my husband. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, she's right. It's never going to be solved. If it could have been solved, it would have been solved by now. We're not
Yeah.
going to talk each other into anything. And I love that you brought up that it's an unequal playing field because I have so much better communication skills than my husband. And I did kind of use it against him in a
Yeah.
way of trying to manipulate things and control things to get things how I wanted. And also, it kind of put me in victim mode that he
Mhm.
was the problem and he was if he would just change, then everything would be fine because I was doing the work and he wasn't. Like yeah, I call it brain BS can be very sneaky. We can get very self-righteous and think somebody should be changing their behavior, but typically that means we should be going inward to look at our own behavior, right? And so one of the things that my husband um, has an issue with is my family's in Ohio and he just doesn't like to travel to Ohio. You have to fly there and then you have to drive like an hour and 15 minutes to get wherever you go. We don't really have a house to stay in. We end up staying at a hotel. And he's been complaining about it pretty much our entire marriage. So this year I was turning 60 and I wanted him to go. And I thought about all your actions, and we're going to talk about all of them. But I came to the conclusion that it was really important to me that he be at my 60th birthday party. But I just let him know that. And then I stopped talking about it.
That's good.
Which is some of the steps in there. And then he actually did end up going. But when I just kept going on and on about it and getting myself into a tizzy every time I thought about it. And plus, he didn't even understand why I thought half the things that I did about him going to Ohio. He's just like, it's just a pain.
Yeah, yeah. But you mentioned that it's important to you and then dropped it and didn't try to keep badgering him or convincing him. And that was a brilliant strategy. Absolutely. Then he needs to make up his mind. If he wants to do you this big favor, he will. And if not, not. That
Yeah,
was
exactly. And well, so that's not like that's one of your 8 actions. So your actions totally helped me with this. Another book that helped me that's similar to your concept, but has different language is Terry Real's book, Us.
uh-huh,
He
uh-huh.
talks about the emotions in a marriage and taking responsibility for yourself and focusing for yourself. So between the two of you, you set me up quite nicely to be able to handle things in my relation and not just marriage either. In
No,
my opinion, this applies to all
these
relationships. I've been using these with everyone.
strategies work in any relationship. Yeah, with your kids, with your colleagues at work, and
Yeah,
friends.
yeah. Okay, so the third one is act as if.
Now, this is powerful because most of us have learned that you have to express your feelings, and it turns out there's no law in the universe that you have to behave in the same way you feel. So let's say your partner comes home late for the umpteenth time without calling you. And so when your partner finally shows up and dinner's cold and you're angry and you get angry and you say, why didn't you call me? Why can't you learn to call me? And you are angry and righteous. It turned as an experiment. The next time it happens, you can try behaving in a different way. Now you're still angry inside, you're still righteous, you're right, he's wrong, all of that is still true, but you put on a little act. You act as if you are not angry as an experiment. Now, not as a deception, but as an experiment. You've been getting angry about this for the last 10 years, and you just keep repeating everything, and he keeps coming home late and nothing happens. So as an experiment, this time he comes home late, you greet him with a glass of wine, you have little hors d'oeuvres set up in the living room, and you sit there and how was your day? And you tell about your day, and you don't behave in an angry way. And guess what? You end up having a lovely evening together, and you transform that by behaving in a different way from the way you felt as an experiment. See what happens. See how you feel when you do that. See how he responds when you do that. All of these actions, we should have prefaced it by saying all of these actions should be viewed as an experiment. Because when you do an experiment, you don't plan on a certain outcome. I'm going to do this and I know I'll get this result. No, the reason scientists do experiments is to find out what happens. So you try these as an experiment and you pay close attention to whether it works for you or doesn't work, or what the outcome is. Not maybe works or doesn't work isn't even the right language, because see how you feel, see if it made a difference in the atmosphere between you, and evaluate how the experiment went, and then maybe try it again. So this, to me, is a very powerful one to try acting in a different way from the way you feel as an experiment.
Okay, so I love this one because at first when I looked at this one, I was a little on the fence about it. And the reason is, but you pointed it out today, because it's really, if you look at it as an experiment and it's the energy behind it, but as some of us being people pleasers and not taking care of ourselves and kind of being phony with our partner for decades and our family, and we act as if something's okay when it's not. That's a different energy than when you're experimenting with something and trying a different response on purpose.
Deliberately.
Right? Yeah, you're deliberately doing it. So it's not the same as if you're just pretending again and you're not being honest and authentic. This is a purposeful experiment of trying to respond to your partner instead of react, and do it in a thoughtful way that could possibly work to both your advantages.
And it changes there's that song, I whistle a happy tune to try to, when I feel afraid, and I fool myself as well, is one of the lines in that song. That is how this works. You behave in a different way, and then as the evening goes on and you're having a pleasant time, the anger abates, you feel better. You're having a nice evening together instead of another angry evening. And you transform your feelings, and maybe you can give up on this desire that he always call you when he's going to be late, or whatever the issue is. I remember doing this one time when we were about to go on a drive somewhere, and I don't even remember what the incident was. It was something about a rug, but he had done something that made me angry. And I decided that I didn't want to have this unpleasant drive we were going on. So I just buried it. And I said pleasant things, even though I was angry inside. We ended up having a lovely drive. And by the end of the first half hour, I had given up on being angry, and we had a lovely time, instead of a drive where I was yelling at him and being all angry. It's a very useful skill.
Yeah. And I like how this is unfolding too, because the truth is that you use these actions all together. Like they're kind of like, so the next one is practicing restraint. I practiced restraint with my husband by not going on and behaving the same way. And I acted as if in a different way. I experimented instead of trying to get him to do what I wanted. But when you're talking about the person who comes home late all the time, that is probably a fact of life and not a problem to be solved if they've been doing it over and over again repeatedly. So it serves you to find a different way to look at that.
Absolutely true. Absolutely right. And the next one, practicing restraint, is also one of the really key actions. When I run these groups for couples, they go for 8 weeks or sometimes 12 weeks, and it's one member of the group, or one member of the partnership of the marriage comes to the group. And the first exercise I give is for this week, make a pact, make an agreement with yourself that you will not say anything negative, critical, or demanding to your partner. Now, what always happens in the second week is people go, oh my heavens, I had no idea I was being so critical or so demanding or negative. Negative, even about the news or anything. I mean, try to keep the conversation positive and don't see anything negative or demanding or critical about your partner or to your partner. It's stunning because usually what you think is that your partner is causing the problem. I remember one couple with this was so transformative because he complained that she wasn't affectionate enough, that she'd be all caught up in her work and wouldn't give him enough affection or what have you. And what he discovered is that he thought she was the problem because she wasn't affectionate enough. But in fact, he was the person creating all the upset in the relationship by bringing it up all the time and criticizing her. And it was a big revelation to him that he was creating the problems in the relationship. He totally let go of that, dropped it all together. And of course, guess what? She became more warm and affectionate to him because he wasn't criticizing her all the time. Many relationships suffer from one partner being too critical of the other partner. And giving that up can transform a relationship. You don't need to criticize your partner or be negative or demanding. Give it up and see how it transforms the relationship. If you're on the receiving end of criticism, that's harder. And we deal with that in the book too. You have to try not to get caught up in it, try to let it roll off your back. You can gently suggest that your partner try to not be so critical of you, but again, you can't make a big deal out of it or it becomes another problem in the relationship. So I can see using restraint and not being critical and negative as very, very important.
Yeah, I noticed when I started doing that, that I was demanding, I was controlling. I was trying to, and he kind of, it was a dynamic that we created together of him acting like he can't get things done on his own and me needing to be the one, like we created that together. So when I started practicing not doing that, I also had to practice restraint of criticizing him for the way he was dealing with it, right? Like, because I had to put him on his own little journey of his, his own self journey of how he's going to behave now in his marriage with me without me taking care of so many things for him. So it was practicing restraint is useful in so many relationships, right? We don't have to, and it all goes with you don't have to say everything you're feeling. You want to adopt the spirit of goodwill. So that helps me a lot when it comes to practicing restraint, because I'll say to myself, this is my husband and I'm supposed to love him. If this
Yeah.
is my partner in life, the closest person to me, do I really want to not have a spirit of goodwill? And a lot of times to maintain that spirit of goodwill, I have to act as if, and I have to practice restraint, because a lot of the things that he's doing that I think are annoying are really not him. They're me. It's me and the way I'm looking at him that's making me annoyed because I don't like the way I'm feeling, but it really isn't, he's just being himself.
Right, right. And, a close corollary to this is the understanding that being right is the booby prize of life. You get to be right, but you don't get to feel close and warm. You don't get to have an affectionate relationship. You don't get to have a smooth, happy evening, but you're insisting on being right. Many arguments are about that. I'm right about this and you're wrong. And give it up. It doesn't matter. You don't have to convince your partner. You don't, and being right, you can feel like you're right, but it doesn't gain you anything except being right, which is a booby prize.
Yeah.
So the way you can use restraint is just give up that whole thing about I have to be right about this.
Yeah. And then I'll just be totally honest too, because that's sort of like my thing. Sometimes I will literally think I could totally practice restraint here, but I'm not going to. I don't want to. And I'm ready to have a argument, or I'm ready to stand my ground on something. So I also think that these actions are really useful and amazing, but sometimes you can purposely, consciously choose not to adopt them if there's some, if you're inspired, if that's where your intuition's taking you and your energy. And but I do it knowingly, and then sometimes I do it not knowingly, and I catch myself right after, and then I own it and I apologize,
Yeah.
or I say whatever I feel needs to be said, and I don't beat myself up for it, because it is a process to learn how to take leadership in your relationship without the other person even being aware that you're doing it.
Oh, it's a learning curve for sure. And one of the things you're, as you said, going to notice is that you already did it, but you noticed it this time. You paid attention. So the next time you might get the urge to criticize or whatever it is, but you'll stop yourself. It's
Mhm.
definitely a learning curve, and then nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
And
And then sometimes when you're married to someone and you've been with them a long time, sometimes you're just like, I'm going to fight. I'm not saying that that's the way to go or recommending it. I'm normalizing it for other people that go to do this, because it is a practice and it
well,
requires discipline and effort.
fights are almost always useless. I mean, you
Yeah.
get into an argument, one of you should just leave the room. Just leave the room, cool off, and maybe talk about it later, or maybe it'll just go away. Or don't treat it like a problem, treat it like a fact of life, and see how it evolves. Don't, I mean, couples who bicker and argue all the time, that is so unnecessary. Just stop. So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that is my philosophy the majority of times, but I'm a human with a brain, so I'm not perfect all the time with that, but it's definitely something to work towards. So the
sometimes
next one, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
good argument or a good fight feels right and feels good, and it's not going to destroy the relationship, and you can just spar a little bit, but pay attention, because if it's making you both unhappy, just stop doing it. So
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree with that. Okay, so I really like this next one too, and the spin that you have on it with the balance, the giving and the taking.
most of us have the image in the relationship, am I giving 100% and is he giving 100% or 50% or whatever your model is? And what this is suggesting, instead of using that model, give that one up, because you have no control over your partner. You have no control over what your partner does or doesn't do. And if your partner's not doing 50%, you can't, what are you going to do to try to change that? No, you can never solve a problem by trying to get your partner to change. So give up that model. And the new model is, am I taking care of my partner 100%? And am I taking care of myself 100%? Because you have total control over that. And you can judge within yourself, okay, I gave in on this issue and I understand why he wanted that. And so I'm happy to give it to him. But I'm also going to take care of myself in this other way. So he went off for a weekend golfing with his buddies. Okay, I didn't want him to do that, but that's fine. I'm going to go off with my girlfriends on a weekend and let him stay with the children. Or, I mean, that's a kind of a, simplistic example, but there are many, many ways that you can ask yourself, can I solve this issue by doing something to take care of myself, take care of my own needs? I mean, another example with a couple was she felt like he had all the control over the finances. And she had to ask him if she could buy a new dress, but if he wanted a new tool, he could just go buy it. And she felt that was very out of balance. And so she started figuring out ways that she could take care of herself by separating some of the money out for herself. Of course, that was an obvious thing that helped a lot. And also by making him aware that she was taking advantage of sales, so that would make him feel good. I bought all the kids' shoes for school this year. There was a big sale or savings. So you can find ways to to take care of a problem you're having in the relationship by taking care of yourself. And am I taking care of my partner and myself? You have control over that.
Yeah. And I think many times in a marriage, there can be one person that feels that they're giving a lot more than the partner is. And what they're realizing is that they could be taking also, but they don't think it's optional. I know I didn't. I just thought this is the way it is. And I didn't have it in me at that point until I did the work on myself to make my needs a priority and to be able to receive. I had been such a giver and not a giver. And I could be really giving in a loving, kind way, but I could also be a giver in a resentful, people pleasing kind of
Uh,
way. And blaming that also on him always getting his way. But I let him have his way, and that happens a lot in marriages, especially a lot with women, and giving in and doing what the man wants. So for me, when I read that, I was like, oh, this is like I could take things for myself, and all these things that I've been giving into and letting him have, I can slowly start giving myself things that I've been wanting to do and I haven't done because he doesn't like it when I do them. I can actually slowly start doing them. And I did. And it felt really good to take care of myself and get what I needed and not just be taking care of him all the time.
And you can figure out ways to do that. And sometimes you have to brainstorm. Sometimes it's not completely obvious. How could I take better care of myself with regard to this? And you can brainstorm with friends or chat with your women friends about it, and you'll get an idea. Gee, I could do that. So sometimes it's not obvious, but there are always ways that you can take care of yourself at the same time you're taking care of him. Another very old-fashioned idea is this marriage should be equal. The housework should be equal, the
Yeah.
amount of time the children should be equal. You forget that. A lot of good, wonderful marriages are not totally equal like that. You don't want to ask it, is everything equal? You want, and fair, is it fair? Give that up. What you want to ask is it working for us? Is it effective? And I mean, in some marriages, the 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 housework and the cooking and all that falls more on one person than the other, but that's okay because with them, it doesn't have to be exactly equal and fair. The question you want to ask is, does it work for us and is it effective?
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so this next one completely changed my life. It sort of went with the balance, the giving and the taking, because when I realized how many things I could be doing. So the next one is act on your own. And when I realized how much stuff I could be doing on my own that I was letting my partner do for me, and it was disempowering for me. He was trying to be, even though he was kind of being kind and loving, after being married to him for so long and letting him do all those things for me. And then I getting to a point where I wasn't doing it on my own because we did it together, and then trying to talk him into doing stuff with me. And then just realizing that I could just do it by myself. It was a process to get back to that point.
Yes, it's true. I love the example of a couple I was working with who she was badgering him. They needed a new couch. Their couch was frumpy looking and had a big hole in it. And he just said, put a pillow over the hole. And he didn't want to do it. So one day she read this. She was working in a group with me, and she went out and bought her a new couch. She didn't need to get his agreement on that. And of course, he realized it was a good thing to do. But even if he hadn't, she needed to, that was an important thing to her, and she needed to just act on her own and do that. And there are many times when you don't want to go against the wishes of your partner and defy your partner in a mean way, but often there are things you can just go ahead and do to please yourself. It's part of taking care of yourself, and not wait for the permission of your partner.
Yeah. So a couple examples of how I did that was I used to cover for him all the time, my husband, if he didn't want to do things with people.
Oh,
I wanted to do things with them.
uh-huh.
So then I was like, okay, well, I'll just go with them on my own and just tell them that you weren't up for joining us. And then when I stopped doing and I was willing to do things on my own, then he changed his behavior because I was doing things on my own. So it started with little things like socializing. And then we live on the North Shore of Chicago. And I wanted to go to the city again after COVID. And he didn't want to because he didn't think it was safe. So then I was like, okay, I'm going by myself then. So it was a process to get comfortable doing things by myself. But the big thing that I'm doing this year, and I want to give you a little credit because of this loving action of acting on your own, is we have a house in Santa Barbara. And this is the first year we're going to spend the whole winter here. And I am the one that's leading the way with that because we've had a house in Santa Barbara for 10 years and I am over Chicago winters and I'm ready to go. And I told my husband that I'm going to go on a cross country adventure, just me and the dogs. And we're going to drive to California by ourselves and make a whole adventure out of it. He did not like it. And he was like, he didn't like that I was going to do it. He was worried about my safety. He was worried about a lot of things. So in the end, I decided I would meet him towards the end and have him be a part of the adventure as well. So he was included and I was letting him be a part of it, but I still got to act on my own and I get to do what I want when I want it for like 3 weeks by myself with the dogs and just meet up and go east or west or whatever, which is like his worst nightmare. He wants it like all planned.
Oh, boy, that's a good example. And I actually have one in my own life. I had forgotten about this, but we had been married a very short time. We were passionately in love for the whole time, all 40 years. But this was at the very beginning. And we had been back, I'm from Ohio too, Columbus.
Are you
And
a Buckeye? Me too.
oh, you said, I was
Yeah.
till the end, but so when we were in California, but we had been back to Ohio for events around the wedding and everything. And so then a month later was my high school reunion. Well, I was not going to miss it, but he didn't want me to go. We can't afford the flight, and you were just there. And so I was trying to convince him, no, this is really important to me. I'm going to go. And he kept saying no, tried to persuade me not. So one day I bought my ticket. I didn't need to persuade him. I didn't need, I'd been single for 6 years before that. I ran my own life. I suddenly realized, wait a second, I don't have to get his permission to do this. And he was, ended up being fine with it. It wouldn't been his choice, but I acted on my own. I just went and bought the ticket. I didn't have to convince.
Yeah, that's awesome. You bring up a good point though, because I didn't get married till almost 40. So I was used to doing everything by myself. But then I got used to not doing everything by myself. And having someone do things for me was very, very attractive. And I got very used to it. And then I realized that even with myself, the balance of the giving and the taking, that I need to do more for my own. I need to act on my own sometimes. I need to just to maintain that personal power that you have and that feeling of capability. So the acting on the own one was a really big one for me. I love that one.
Good. I'm glad it empowered you. It's exciting.
Yeah. And then the next one is practice acceptance.
Well, the last two kind of go very closely together, acceptance and compassion, because you have to really get that your partner is not going to change for you. We all have a little flame burning inside of us, and our life's purpose is to keep that flame burning brightly. And so we find things that we love to do and people we love to be with, and feel competent at. And if as the partner of a person with a little flame inside, if you throw kind of dirt on that flame and sort of try to put it out instead of breathing oxygen into it, you're not really being the most spiritual partner that you could be. So you need to go into your partner's background. How did your partner get to be this way? What kind of, I don't know, upbringing or childhood, or what kinds of experiences earlier in life could have made your partner this way? and just accept the things that you don't love that you would change if you had a magic wand. Because the only other alternative is either being angry with your partner about that all the time or trying to change your partner. And that creates negativity in the relationship and it will never work. So it's fundamentally important to develop that compassion and acceptance. And really comes full circle back to a spirit of goodwill that you need to cultivate for your partner and understand how your partner got to be this way and be accepting of it.
Yeah. And you know what else I think is really important about this, and it made me think about it with your book, is that as there's no guarantees in life how long our partner is going to be with us. We don't know when something could happen to them. It could happen at any moment. And we see this all the time with other people. And you see the people who struggle the most when they lose somebody that they love, it's typically because they didn't get to show them how much they love them when they're alive. They didn't treat them the way that makes them feel really good about how they behave towards them. And then they have to carry that with them after the partner's gone. So I remind myself all the time, like sometimes when I get mad at him or I get whatever, I'm just like, but he's my husband. And like, what if this was the last time I was going to see him? How am I going to deal with that if something happened to him, or, vice versa? And the last thing he had with me was me being critical of him. So I think as we get older, it's even easier to understand the importance of that there's no guarantees, and you want to feel good about the way you behaved with your partner at the end of your life and when they're gone.
That's a really, really good point. I mean, you can keep that in mind all the time. If you're in the middle of an argument, what if one of us drops dead? Is this the last? I love that. I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind. Have I conveyed my love sufficiently and recently enough? Have I been supportive and loving and
Yeah.
not? That's
And
a
even
really,
if you're not feeling it, you can still act as if, and you can just say, I'm kind of annoyed with you right now, but I really love you. And I want you to know that, if you can't get out of it and really get into that spirit of goodwill. But just a reminder that that's certainly not the way I want anything to go in any of my relationships with people I care about. That I want them to know that I love them, and I want to feel good about myself at the end of my life too.
right, right. Yeah, that's a very good point. I like that.
Thank you. So is there anything, we went through the 8 actions, and I think I just want to reinforce too that your workshops are with one person when you were doing them. And I love that because there's so many people who don't think that they can work at their relationships because the partner won't go to therapy, or the partner won't talk about it, or the partner doesn't want to get a coach or any of those things. And this is such an awesome way for one person to have such a huge impact on the relationship, and it will have a ripple effect on the partner.
Oh, definitely. And it's so empowering because people come to my groups who have been working with the same issue forever and never making any impact or any change on it. And these are subtle ways that you can impact the relationship. Your partner doesn't even have to know that you're experimenting with new behavior, but your partner will begin to notice it when you stop criticizing or you start taking initiative yourself to take care of your own needs and things like that. The groups are really powerful because we all support each other. The way they work is we all learn the 8 loving actions, and then we each pick one issue in our relationship, and the whole group together devises an experiment for that person around that problem. And then the next week, we're all very invested in how the experiment went, and we all learn from each other. And some people who are reluctant to do an experiment hear the success of other people, and then they're willing to do an experiment. They're very powerful groups. And I do want to mention that on my website, which is susanpage.com, SUSANPAGE, susanpage.com, I have a training manual for therapists or lay people how to conduct one of these groups. And I encourage people to do it on your own. Get 4 or 5 people together who want to do this together, meet every week, and the instructions for exactly how to do that, how to run each meeting, are in this training manual. So it's available on my website for
Oh,
professional lay people.
oh, I love it. I'm totally going to get it. I'm going to do it.
It's really chapter and verse. It's very thorough. And my other books also relate to all the things we've been talking about. My first book was called If I'm So Wonderful, Why Am I Still Single? And it's a very popular guide for singles, looking at your own ambivalence about getting into a relationship and other things like that, and habits that you have that you may not be aware of that are sabotaging your effort to find love. And then the second book is called 8 Essential Traits of Couples Who Thrive. And I interviewed happy couples who self-report that they were thriving and happy to see if I could tease out what they have in common. And it's a delightful read. It's a very unusual couples book. And then I have one called How One of You Can Bring the Two of You Together, which is the principles that we've been talking about, presented a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And this is called Why Talking Is Not Enough.
Yeah. Well, I love this book, and everybody knows I do because I post about it all the time.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate your enthusiasm for the work and for the book, and I appreciate the invitation to talk with you.
Yeah. Thank you for being here, audience. I know you learned something valuable here today. I'll see you next episode. Thanks for being here and learning about Brain BS. I hope you enjoyed listening to the episode as much as I enjoyed creating it for you. If you did, please take a little time to do a quick review, give me 5 stars, and share it with everyone you know. If you're actually interested in being on the podcast yourself or have questions about it, you can find me in the Brain BS podcast community on Facebook. See you next time.